You all voted on the next video idea, and yes, this topic only came in second place. But don't worry, the poll winner, Belarus and Romania, what 30 years of different choices look like, is coming soon. So, over to the firewall, or if you want it in fancy Brussels French, the cordon sanitaire. It's basically this unwritten rule in European politics that mainstream centrist parties don't work with the far right. No coalitions, no deals, and no, hey, let's vote together on this one thing. For decades, that's just how things worked. But did that change this week? Because on Thursday, the European Parliament voted on something very big, together with the far right. Let me explain. Ursula von der Leyen and her European party, the centre-right EPP, have promised for ages that they'd cut red tape. Less paperwork, less Brussels bureaucracy. And since they won the EU elections, they've basically been on a warpath to deliver exactly that. Which brings us to the Sustainability Omnibus Bill. Yes, the name is so ridiculous. Nobody outside of Brussels has any idea what it means. But in a nutshell, it's meant to set the tone for her whole simplification agenda and her push to cut EU regulation. So what's actually inside this thing? A lot. But let's stick to the three main parts. First, social and environmental reporting. Right now, plenty of companies, even mid-sized ones, have to report their environmental impact, their climate risks, their emissions, and all of that. But under this new proposal, the bar jumps way higher. Only companies with more than 1,000 employees and over 450 million euros in turnover would still need to report. Everyone else, out. That's why the Commission says up to 80% of companies that were supposed to report won't have to anymore. The second part concerns supply chain transparency. These rules were originally meant to force companies to look down their supply chains. Are there human rights abuses? Environmental problems? Something sketchy happening 5 suppliers deep? Under the new version, though, this is all getting scaled back. The rules would now apply only to very large companies, basically corporate giants with more than 5,000 employees and over 1.5 billion euros in turnover. And this means that many companies that were supposed to map their supply chains and check for risks simply don't need to anymore. And finally, Parliament has also scrapped the idea of EU-level fines of up to 5% of a company's net turnover for breaking any of these rules. Instead, the new text just says penalties should be set at appropriate levels, which basically means it's now up to each member state to decide how tough or how soft those fines will be. Okay, so that's the bill. So what actually happened that caused all of the outrage in Brussels? Well, only a month ago, the EPP tried to pass this bill with support from the center-left Socialists and Democrats and the centrist Renew Europe. Basically, the classic centrist majority in the European Parliament. But that vote failed because a chunk of socialists rebelled. This really did not sit well with European leaders, especially German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who even called the vote a fatal mistake. So, fast forward to yesterday, and there was another attempt. And this time, it passed. 382 votes in favor, 249 against, and 13 abstentions. But here is the key difference. This time, the EPP got it through with votes from the right-wing conservative ECR and the far-right PFE. You know, the Orbáns, the Le Pens, and the Wilders of this world. And for those who love parliamentary deep dives, yes, you can also see how your country voted right now. You can pause the video if you'd like. Now, obviously, this did not go down well with the EPP's usual allies, the Socialists and Democrats, Renews, and even the Greens. And one of the Social Democrat negotiators even went as far as to bring up the 1930s, when conservatives broke with Social Democrats and ended up in government alongside the Nazis, clearing the path for Hitler. Now, to be honest, that comparison is outrageous, and frankly, pretty insulting. It annoyed me so much, in fact, that I decided to sit down and actually make this very video. Because the question we now need to answer is whether this truly was the historic breach of the firewall, the moment the far right marched into the mainstream, like the left-leaning parties are loudly claiming. Or is that a massive exaggeration? To figure this out, we need to look at the different levels of cooperation between mainstream parties and the far right. Because not all cooperation is the same. Some forms are subtle, others are full-on political alliances. And at level 1, there's limited cooperation. This is basically the most basic form. Mainstream parties don't officially work with the far right, but they still accept their votes when it helps them to pass something. And honestly, that's pretty much what happened in Brussels yesterday. There's no deal, no pact, no agreement. Just a simple, hey, thanks for the votes, and everyone walks away. Then there's level 2, a confidence and supply or toleration agreement. In this setup, a far-right party agrees to support a government in exchange for policy concessions, but they don't actually hold any ministerial posts. A very clear example here is Sweden. The Sweden Democrats don't sit in government, but they back the center-right coalition and influence policy from the outside, especially on migration and welfare. Mainstream parties stay in power, and the far right gains influence without formally joining the cabinet. Then we have level 3, coalition governments. Now this is a real game changer. A far-right party actually joins the government as an official coalition partner. And yes, this has happened in Europe. In the Netherlands, Geert Wilders' PVV became the largest party in the 2023 election and entered a 4-party coalition in 2024. Wilders himself did not become prime minister though. The parties agreed on a compromise candidate, Dick Schoof, and the government actually collapsed soon after. So even when a far-right party enters government, it doesn't automatically mean they get the top job or full control. And then at level 4, there's leadership. This is pretty much the highest level. A far-right party doesn't just join a coalition, its leader becomes prime minister or chancellor. Some argue this is already the case in Italy, where Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy won the 2022 election and she became the prime minister. So, those are the different levels of cooperation between mainstream parties and the far right. What do you think is acceptable? Because this is how I see it. The last 10 years of building walls against the far right simply haven't worked. Look at France. In 2012, Marine Le Pen's National Rally won 2 seats. In 2024, they jumped to 142 seats. Germany shows a very similar story. In 2013, the AfD won 0 seats in the Bundestag. This year, in 2025, they came in second, with 152 seats. And you can spot the same trend all across Europe. So clearly, something isn't working. Let's have another look at the European Parliament for a second. Right now, around 53% of MEPs come from center-right, right-wing, and far-right groups. About 10% are centrists, and roughly 33% are from the center-left, left-wing, or far-left. Whether you like it or not, voters across Europe have chosen a more right-leaning parliament. And here is the core problem. The firewall forces the EPP, the center-right group, to work with parties to their left, which means pushing through policies that currently don't have a majority among voters. Honestly, I really feel for the conservative parties right now. They're stuck in a brutal squeeze. If they go left and work with the Social Democrats and Greens, the far right attacks them by basically saying, see voters, they're not delivering the conservative policies you voted for. But, on the other hand, if they go towards the right and cooperate on individual pieces of legislation with right-wing or far-right parties, the center and the left start shouting, the firewall is dead, you're working with fascists, how dare you? And this brings me back to our pyramid. If left-leaning parties, who don't have a majority right now, refuse to compromise with conservative voters' priorities, then honestly, I think level 1 cooperation is acceptable. I would much rather meet voter expectations by actually solving their concerns, even if that means accepting far-right votes on specific files. This is so much better than just sitting back and watching far-right parties climb up to level 3, or even level 4, where they take leadership positions. In other words, rather work with the far-right now, while you still have a majority and control the narrative. Because if things continue as they are at the moment, the far-right will get outright majorities, and then they will control the narrative. As for the regulation that passed yesterday, I do have mixed feelings. I really think there are other areas the EU can work on, which will help make us more competitive a lot more than what passed yesterday. But that's a topic for another video. Now, as you can see, we've got a new office, and it's pretty awesome. We have a nice little flag there. We have a plant, small little plant, and yeah, we feel great here. Way better than filming in front of a green screen with my head wobbling around. But I live in Munich in Germany and studio prices here are ridiculously expensive. This place costs 850 euros a month, and it's kind of in a dodgy area of Munich. And right now, our Patreon brings us 583 euros a month. So we're about 270 euros short of paying for this office with your membership contributions. So if you enjoy this channel and want to help us keep this beautiful space and even make better content for you in the future, please consider joining us on Patreon. It really does make a huge difference. Thank you to our presidents, Jan Schauke, Christian Peter, AGVD, Daniel Upedia, Unite Europe, Stefan Europe, and Kiki Loxen.